So hello everyone, my name is Nuray and I'm going to teach about giving feedback on students' mistake. So let's get started. So feedback and receive and to give and correct feedback. So it should be take time 20 minutes and all we have to need is a laptop and notes. It's online lesson. So I will explain what is feedback and types of. At the end of the lesson, I will give some practice exercise in order to fix what was learned. So let's get started. So what is feedback? Feedback is information that the teacher or another speaker, including another learner, gives the learners on how well they are doing, either to help the learner improve specific points or to help plan their learning. Feedback can be immediate during an activity or delayed at the end of an activity or part of a learning program and can take various forms. For example, a teacher agrees with learners that they will not be corrected during a conversation activity, but that the teacher will take notes and give feedback afterwards. So, feedback can be formative, which means that it intended to modify the learner's thinking, and it should improve the student's progress. And assessment, it provides a grade or mark in order to improve some skills. So why feedback? Feedback can be given during oral and written work, and feedback can help the learner assess themselves, to see what was learned, and it is very important for both student and for teachers. For teachers, it is the factors that indicates the progress of the students and how well their lessons has been, and the students to improve their speaking, writing, pronunciation skills, for example. Here I have a question for you. It is, should teachers deal with every production of mistake? And if you think so, why do you think so? So let's get further. So here, as you can see, we have implicit feedback and also we have explicit correction. What does it mean? Implicit feedback, it is without interrupting communication. For example, teacher says, for example, learner says, yesterday I bought a lot of clothes. And teacher says, oh, you bought a lot of clothes yesterday. And explicit correction, it is vice versa of implicit correction, which means that the teacher indicates, the teacher points that the learner has made a mistake. For example, learner says, yesterday I bought a lot of clothes. And teacher says, oh, not, it's incorrect. You should say, you bought a lot of clothes. Feedback can be given during oral work, and here we have a quote: the immediate and constant correction of all errors is not necessarily an effective way of helping course participants improve their English. So feedback can be given during accuracy work. So a distinction is often made between accuracy and fluency. We need to decide whether a particular activity is in the classroom is designed to expect the student complete accuracy, as in the study of piece of grammar or a pronunciation exercise or some vocabulary work, for example, or whether we are asking the students to use the language as fluently as possible. So more students want and expect us to give them feedback on their performance. So that is why we should make a distinction. So as suggested above, correction is usually made up two distinct stages. It can be during accuracy, it can be during fluency work. The first, teachers show students that a mistake has been made, and in the second, if necessary, they help the students to do something about it, which means that teachers have to help the students to correct this mistake. And these techniques can be helpful in order to correct these mistakes. So showing incorrectness can be done in a number of different ways, which you can see is in this slide. So it can be repeating, echoing, statement and question, expression, hinting, and reformulation. Repeating, here we can ask the student to repeat what was said. For example, the student has said a wrong sentence, and you should say like, again, can you repeat, or something like that. Echoing, it is this can be like in repeating what the student has said, emphasizing the part of the mistake. For example, I go to the cinema, and you say like, you go to the cinema, or something like that. So statement and question. We can of course simply say good try, but that's not quite right. For example, the learner says, I go to the cinema, and the teacher indicate one statement. For example, it is incorrect, and then suggest a question. For example, like, what do other people think? Expression. If you know your class well, you can use some facial expressions, gestures, so students have to be aware of these expressions. Hinting, it is a quick way. For example, the student has made a mistake, and you give a hint. For example, teacher says tense, and the learner has to understand that he should change the tense form. Reformulation, it means that it is use both accuracy and fluency work. It is just like to repeat back the correct version. For example, I go to the cinema, and then teacher says, oh, you went to the cinema. If students are unable to correct themselves or to respond to formulation, we need to focus on the correct version in the more detail. We can say the correct version emphasizing the part where there is a problem. So let's get further. Feedback during fluency work can be given in 3 different stages. First of all, it is gentle correction. If communication, for example, breaks down and the student doesn't understand how to correct themselves, we can offer our help with tact and discretion. Our correction should be more gentle to make intervention less disruptive. It can be offered in a number of ways. For example, we can reformulate the sentence, or using some echoing, or using some facial gesture expressions. It should be done without any interrupting. So, recording mistakes. The teachers, they frequently act as observers, watchers, and they listen to the students, and sometimes they can give feedback afterwards at the end of the lesson. Um, so it will be it can be positive, it can be negative feedback. Recording mistakes, which means that um, they can record students' language performance with audio or video records, or at the end of the lesson teacher can write the mistakes that has occurred during the lesson, and then discuss it with the whole classroom. After the event, when we have recorded students' performance, we'll want to give feedback on the class. We can do this in a number of ways. We might want to give an assessment, saying how well we thought the students did it, and getting the students tell us what they found easiest or most difficult. We can write individual notes to the student, or for example, you can write some mistakes, correct an incorrect version of these mistakes, and then letting the students to decide what is correct. Feedback can be given during written work. Here, as you can see, it can be correction codes, training students, which means that letting them correct mistakes, and involving students, which means that you will encourage them to peer review. So here, as you can see, there are some correction codes. Many teachers use these correction codes to indicate that students have made mistakes in their written work. These codes can be written into the body of the text itself, and different teachers use different types of correction codes, and here is a minimum format of this. So in the internet you can find hundreds of them, or even to create your new ones. For example, it can be if it's spelling error, you can just write SP, for example, or it can be wrong word. For example, it is just W and R. So you can screen this slide and then use it further. I'm sorry. Finishing the feedback process. Teachers' reason for using codes, symbols while correcting students' works is the same. If the students can identify the mistakes they have made, they are in position to correct this mistake. And the feedback process is only really finished once they have made these changes. And if the students consult grammar books or dictionary as a way of resolving some of the mistakes we have signaled for them, the feedback we had given has had a positive outcome. Here I have a question again. What has your experience been with receiving feedback as a language learner, and what type of feedback was useful and not so useful? If there are some volunteers, they can answer. So let's get further. Burning the midnight oil. We burn the midnight oil is an article which discusses the stress of written feedback for teachers and students. To work into the light, original, this was by the side of an oil lamp or candle, but why should we burn the midnight oil? So for students, the sight of their work hours in corrections can cause great anxiety, and for teachers it is also boring and they can be tired, and that is why both teachers and students should take a break. Along with the commentators, Lee has a number of ways of varying the amount of marking and the way teachers do it. This includes selective marking, which means that teachers do not have to select and mark all the time everything. If we do, it takes great deal of a time, and it can be extremely demotivating for both teachers and students. Also different error codes. For example, the teachers do not have to use the same correction codes all the time. They have to change it sometimes. For example, don't mark all the papers. Teachers may decide only to mark some of the scripts they are given, a sample of the class that has done as a whole. So involve the students, you can involve them correct themselves, or involve the students to correct each other and something like that. So further, I will have some we'll have some practice works. Here, as you can see, there some activities in which you have to find a mistake and then identify what is wrong with this sentence. Whether it's mistake with the tense, or for example with the wrong word order, maybe. You'll have 2 minutes to think. So and then further, also there, as you can see, some sentences, some real life examples. Here you have to identify what techniques the teacher used in order to correct the mistake of the students. So I hope my lesson was interesting for you, and thank you for attention. Goodbye.